Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 20 of Coping with COVID. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names logged on live today. And for those of you watching later, thanks for continuing to watch. I hope we continue to answer all of your questions. Today is Monday, August 31st, last day of August 2020, and we have just a handful of updates to go through today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elaine, and I am the owner of Minerva Financial Arts and a CPA who works exclusively with artists and arts organizations. I am the luckiest CPA ever because I get to do this kind of work with amazing groups and individuals all over the country. As always, this is an educational forum and not intended to be considered tax, legal, or accounting advice. So today, on this final day of August 2020, we have a couple of updates to go over for the FEMA unemployment program. We also got some new information from the IRS last week about the payroll tax deferral that I want to make sure to share with you. And then this says highlight mortgage news, but that's not right. We're going to highlight some savings news that came out recently that I wanted to draw your attention to. So, as you know, the House and the Senate both passed different versions of a new stimulus type of package. There are quite a few differences between these bills, and although each one was passed by each House independently, they have not been reconciled yet, which they need to do before they become law. At the end of last week, talks resumed between the White House and Democrats, but Congress, meaning the House and Senate, are in recess until after Labor Day. So no one's really expecting a whole lot of movement, certainly for the next week or so. And you probably recall as well, a few weeks ago, there were some executive orders signed by the president. The two most relevant ones that have sort of led to some tangible action relate to this FEMA unemployment boost and also the payroll tax deferrals. So this FEMA unemployment program. We're calling it that because that's what it's called, the FEMA Lost Wages Supplemental Payment Assistance Program. And what this does is it basically takes money that Congress had already apportioned for FEMA, and the president redirected it to be used to supplement unemployment payments that were going out from the states to individuals who were unemployed in those states. Basically, what it does is sends $300 of federal money to the states to then distribute to unemployed individuals within their states. States are strongly encouraged to add up to $100 of their own funds so that the weekly supplement would be $400, although there was a memo saying that that seemed a little bit more optional than it did right at the very beginning. It's complicated, right? It's not quite as easy as people just getting the $400 extra per week. You'll probably recall the $600 supplemental payment ended at the end of July. So this was meant to be a quick stopgap to kind of bridge the gap until Congress decided what they were going to do with those supplemental payments in the next round of stimulus. But the executive order required states to create new programs for this and then apply to FEMA for the funds. The other confusion was that states don't always have a lot of money to spare, especially right now. So the idea of finding $100 per unemployed person in the state to kind of match the federal dollars was a challenge for many states. There was this updated memorandum which called on states to make these $100 contributions, but some states are not doing that. So the payments going out will just be the federal dollars. So that has been approved so far from FEMA, and then we'll just kind of see what happens. One restriction on this program is that individuals have to be getting more than $100 in state level unemployment benefits to be eligible for this additional amount. So that means if your unemployment benefit was based on part-time income or something, so maybe your weekly benefit was, say, $84, you would not be eligible for this additional money, which is a challenge because many people who are receiving less than $100 per week in unemployment have a great need for this additional funding, but they are not eligible for it. The other sort of complication with this program is that the number of dollars that were allocated from FEMA to fund this program is not huge. I mean, it's a big number, but given sort of the scope of what is needed, it's not a huge number. So it seems like there's probably between 4 and 6 weeks of coverage or funding for this program. So that's not a ton of time. And because the program is retroactive to August 1st, that means that probably now-ish, or maybe in the next 2 weeks, we'll see this program run out of money. And if you're counting days until Congress reaches resolution on the 2 different stimulus bills, you can see we're getting a little bit close to the wire on that. 40 states have been applied and been accepted to receive the FEMA grants so far. Arizona, Louisiana, Texas, and Tennessee have already started making their payments to unemployed individuals within those states. Missouri is supposed to be making their payments starting this week. That's why there's a $sign and an asterisk there. And Colorado and Alaska have said it may take several more weeks before they start making their payments. So there's still kind of a lot of uncertainty and confusion out there, but FEMA is keeping a really great list of states it has approved. And again, we're already up to 40. If you were on last week, you heard me say that Mississippi had indicated they would not plan to apply for these funds, but they have since changed their mind. Mississippi did apply and was approved to receive these funds. South Dakota has opted out. The governor of South Dakota shared that about 80% of the jobs that were lost had been recovered, so they weren't interested in participating. And then we have these states here: Wisconsin, North Dakota, Minnesota, New Jersey, Kansas, and Nebraska that have not yet applied, but general consensus is that they probably will. The next piece I want to sort of draw your attention to is that payroll tax deferral executive order. So that was all FEMA unemployment money. So if you were unemployed in a state that has applied for these dollars, you will likely see a boost to your unemployment check until the money runs out. This payroll tax pause is slightly different. This is for individuals who are employees of someone else, part-time or full-time. And if that someone else, the employer, is paying you as an employee, they withhold 6.2% of your paycheck to fund Social Security. They withhold for other things too, but what's relevant to this particular executive order is the Social Security withholdings. Now, that 6.2% is only the employee's share. The employer kicks in a separate 6.2% to fund Social Security. This payroll tax pause or deferral enables employers to not withhold the 6.2% from employees for the last 4 months of 2020. Effectively, what this does is increases the take-home pay for those individuals. It only applies to individuals whose annual salaries are less than $104,000 per year. And IRS released some guidance last week that confirmed this is only a deferral. So it does not completely forgive the obligation to pay the Social Security tax, it just defers it. So what this looks like in practice is that for companies who participate in this, the employees will see their take-home pay go up a little bit for the last 4 months of this year, which is pretty good. That makes people feel wonderful. But then people will see their take-home pay go down in the first 4 months of 2021. Employers have to make up this deferral in the first 4 months of 2021. So everybody is still paying the same amount in Social Security tax, but the timing of those payments is a little bit different. So what this looks like in practice is, here's a person who has a job teaching at a college. They are a W-2 employee and they are paid regularly, bi-monthly, I think is how I did the math. So the bi-monthly gross this person gets is $2,500, and then there are withholdings for various things so that their take-home pay is ultimately $1,391. These are ish numbers, but if you look at your own pay stub, if you have a W-2 job, this should feel fairly familiar. What this deferral does is basically affects the Social Security withholding from each person's paycheck from September through December. So for this particular person, they would no longer have that $155 withheld for September through December of 2020, which feels really good because if you look way down at the bottom to their take-home pay, basically, they're getting an extra $155 in each paycheck. So their take-home pay is going to be $1,546 instead of $1,391. And so especially for people who are struggling, right, and who are having expenses that are just about equal to their income, all of a sudden, this is going to feel like quite a lot of relief. But then it gets worse or it gets bad because starting in January, what this means is that employers will essentially double withhold Social Security taxes from everyone. So instead of going back to what was normal, for 4 months at the beginning of 2021, employers will over withhold from Social Security to make up for what they under withheld at the end of 2020. So what this looks like in practice is this person will see their normal take-home pay go up at the end of 2020 and then go down even below what is normal for them at the start of 2021. You can see that Social Security withholding has gone to $310 for this particular person as opposed to remaining at $155. So the effect on their paycheck in January is probably going to hurt. Their take-home pay is going down to $1,236. And again, if someone is living in a way or sort of at the margins where their expenses are pretty close to their income, and we know this is a reality in the arts, this is going to be a big problem starting in 2021 if people aren't prepared for it. So this is the guidance that was released by the IRS at the end of last week that confirms how employers will be treating this. Employers do not have to do this. They could just maintain normal for the whole rest of the year if they think that's better for their employees. But if you are an employee of someone and you receive a paycheck with any regularity, keep an eye on this, especially if you notice your take-home pay going up at the end of this year. We just want to make sure that if you are receiving more money because you do not have Social Security being withheld currently or starting in September, we want to make sure that you still have the cash to go ahead and pay that when it will be withheld in January. So the last piece of news that I've been kind of keeping an eye on is how people have been behaving in terms of their spending during the outbreak. So there was a recent poll, it was a nationally representative sample of just about 1,100 people, 1,075, I think, that was polled last week, and some data was released that said close to 70% of those surveyed have been spending less, which is not surprising. Consumer spending data went way down in April of this year. It has rebounded a little bit, especially as people continue to buy groceries and buy food and maybe start to socialize a smidge more, maybe buying more supplies for their practices, all of those things. So they're still spending less than normal, but we are seeing spending going up a little bit, which is probably good for the economic recovery overall. We also have about 45% of people who report they have been saving more money. And we know anecdotally that's true from what people have been sharing on this particular call, but it's nice to know that there's some nationwide data that supports that many people have been saving more money. There's also people, I think it's about 26%, who have been using the extra money to pay down additional debt. So that's also sort of interesting and important, especially for individuals in the arts whose cash flow is sometimes uncertain. If you have been able to save more money right now, or if you have taken advantage of the additional unemployment or some of these other programs that are working to get money into your pocket, using some of that money to pay down debt is not a terrible idea. There's a question in the chat about the payroll plan. So I'm going to just go back a slide or two. And the question is, does the employee have the choice of deciding whether or not they want this deferral? And my understanding is that it is the employer's decision. And it sounds like that's the understanding of the person in the chat as well. The employer is the one who decides whether or not they're going to participate in this deferral. You can certainly have a conversation with your employer and express your interest to not participate if that's where you are. My guess is, though, just from an administration standpoint, they're going to make probably an all or nothing call for the company as a whole, especially if you work for a major institutional employer. If you work for maybe one person who has maybe 2 or 3 employees and they're running payroll through, Intuit or a smaller provider, they might have some more flexibility. But it is the employer's decision. So what that means for you is that if you see your take-home pay starting to go up, take a peek at your pay stub to see if it's because of your Social Security withholding. And if it is, maybe just set aside a little bit of that extra money, because that's not going to be pleasant in January if you see your take-home pay go way down. So we talked about this information about what has been happening since the outbreak. But, and this is a big but, right? If we're just looking at this information, we see, okay, people are spending less, they're saving more, they're paying down debt, and especially for individuals whose cash flow is uncertain, as it is in the arts, that could be a really, really good thing. But 25% of the population overall has been unable to pay at least one bill due to the pandemic. That's a big number. And that's true even with people spending less and saving more. It's also worth noting that this rate, the percentage of people who have not been able to pay at least one bill, is higher for Black and Hispanic Americans. 47% of Black Americans have not been able to pay at least one bill, and 39% of Hispanic Americans have not been able to pay at least one bill. This highlights even further a lot of the economic inequality that shows up in our financial system regularly. So even if the nationwide average is that 25% of people have been unable to pay at least one bill, that 25% is not evenly distributed among socioeconomic classes and among race and ethnicities. I also want to remind you about what we talked about last week, which was that just over 2 million mortgages are more than 90 days delinquent, which means it's probably likely we'll start to see some additional foreclosures in the not too distant future as those mortgages continue to remain delinquent, unless something happens and people are suddenly able to repay some of their mortgages or the delinquencies. But if people are struggling to pay their bills, and if we don't really see unemployment numbers moving all that much, and if those additional benefits for unemployment and some of the other stimulus assistance doesn't move forward, we don't know that this is going to resolve itself quickly. So it wouldn't be shocking to see more foreclosures on the horizon. So that's our update for today. It's fairly depressing in a lot of ways. The good news is 40 states have now been approved to receive some of the FEMA money to pass on to the unemployed individuals in their states whose weekly unemployment checks are $100 or more. So those individuals will start seeing an additional bump in their unemployment check. The payroll tax pause with the IRS guidance that came out last week is not great. This means that the payroll tax will be a deferral as opposed to just being a complete forgiven sort of payroll tax pause or something like that. So the implications for take-home pay might feel really good towards the end of this year, but then they're going to feel pretty bad at the start of 2021. And then we've seen some conflicting savings data about how people are spending less and saving more, which seems good, but that is certainly not true across the board. And it's highlighting some big economic inequalities that we all know have been there for quite some time. If there are additional questions, you can certainly put them in the chat. Sometimes people have been asking about PPP forgiveness. To the best of my knowledge, financial institutions are not accepting those forgiveness applications yet, mostly because they're still waiting to see where Congress will come out on whether or not PPP loans of less than $150,000 will be automatically forgiven. So hopefully you still have your forgiveness application ready to go when and if companies start accepting those applications. But for right now, just sit tight. You should be totally good on your PPP, and then keep staying tuned for additional information about the legislation. Next Monday is Labor Day, so we will not have a Coping with COVID on Labor Day in observance of the national holiday. And there probably wouldn't be many updates anyway, because Congress isn't coming back into session until after that. So we'll be switching to a monthly format for these sessions. The next one will be on Monday, September 14th, and I'll make sure to send you a link when I send out the recording to this so that you can make sure it is on your calendar and so that you can keep those questions coming. It was quite a big, sobering weekend with the death of Chadwick Boseman, and with the Hurricane Laura and Tropical Storm Marco that passed through and still did incredible destruction, even though it was less than anticipated. So I hope those of you who are in the Gulf area are safe and still doing okay with all of that. I know I watched Black Panther again this weekend, and I'm looking forward to rewatching some of my other favorites to honor just an incredible person that we lost way too soon. That's it for today. Good luck with everything. Keep focused on all of the good work you're doing, and I will look forward to seeing you again on September 14th, when hopefully we'll have some more updates to share. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate your time.